Walls of Light and Sky, a story from the collection entitled Rim by E.S. Wynne. Gentle hands lowered the chrome disk into the golden stubble of the field. A nervous finger traced its way in a slow line across a curve of iridescent teal, lingered, then twitched back again. A soft hum, the sputtering and struggling of the disk inside working through ages and ages of disuse and dust. Lenses and focal emitters dilated like ancient eyes, wary and blind, uncertain of the blurs and twists that flickered in from the world outside. Clear, aquamarine light flared, poured in a sheet from a tiny lens mounted in the center of the disk, carving wireframe lines through the air, taking a moment to craft an elegant digital skeleton and gently clothe it in luminous skin. Eyes made of light and illusion opened slowly, flickering and broken where data corruption ate into them. But even clouded by age and disuse, they were still soft, soft as his spreading smile. "Hello, Theo." She stood staring at him for a long moment, hesitating, afraid that moving might make him flicker away and disappear altogether. She began to reach for him, hands uncertain and needing, but an instant later she caught herself, threading fingers together as brows and features shifted toward pain, toward tears. "William." Theo's eyes roved across the plain face that stared back at her, searched his translucent eyes, the faded shade of summer skies that painted them. The disk's internal database was holding, barely. His clothes were the same as she remembered them, degrading more and more into mobile patches of discolored pixels and damaged shades of skin. He looked like a librarian, she mused, or maybe a butler, distinguished, bespectacled, and a stark contrast to her own farm girl cotton and denim look, indigo eyes peeking out from under black bangs like palm fronds at midnight. Where her skin was the sun-browned and smooth shade of a second-generation colonist, his was pale, whiter than anyone she'd ever seen, the pale pink of someone who spent their entire life hidden away in buildings. He smiled again, that same soft, almost elderly smile, and his voice came tinny and distant, still familiar, still comforting. "I'm here." Theo forced a smile across her face that was only half genuine. In her heart, something twisted and buried its face in the darkness, unable to face the feelings that nagged at it, that nested in her soul, refusing to be turned away. She couldn't touch him. His matrix was so old that it fuzzed and sent static shivers shooting through her fingers with even the slightest brush. But even that wouldn't be enough to keep her from trying. It was the fact that the disk was so old, had become so corrupted with the passing of the half-century it had lain forgotten in a barn before she had found it, that touching him would disrupt his already decaying image, doing damage to the delicate lattice of light and static that the disk spun out to shape him. It was a problem with the older models, her father had said once, the reason why William's software had most likely been left to decay for so long. The new projections were cleaner, built with a degree of modern ingenuity that allowed them to be touched, like the ripped and beach-browned hollow porn stars, whose skin felt soft and warm to the touch, caressed and pressed like real flesh. Theo's smile dulled a little as the thought whispered through her mind. William wasn't hollow porn. He'd never told her what he had been designed to do, what his purpose was, and she didn't care. To her, he was a person, something more than the hollow porn unit her parents had passed off to her, with veiled emotions and hesitant, insecure gestures at a birthday dinner that they quickly buried under excited conversation about crops and the politics of distant star systems. It was supposed to be normal, an accepted practice for ranchers on outlying rim worlds, The kind of thing that was supposed to keep her from falling for some hot-shot freighter pilot passing through with a cargo of supplies from the core of the Commonwealth, only to become the victim of a one-night conquest that would leave her pregnant and heartbroken. That was why they made the effort, why they stepped outside their fears just long enough to attempt a solution. It was like giving a child a Playboy, an interactive chance for her to explore a part of her life that her parents were almost afraid of, a part they didn't want to deal with, didn't want to talk about. But with no one else on the continent but Mommy and Daddy, holoporn had been the kind of thing that was seen as a necessary evil. But in the end, no matter how much time she tried to find it, to seek it out, create it, force it, imagine it, there was no love to a holoporn star, no emotion, no feeling, no connections. It was all just so much physical satiation, something to teach her about the movements, the pleasures, the pains, but something that still left her wanting, needing, unable to find the kind of love that transcended what she felt for her parents. She'd spent countless nights with the machine on, just sleeping in the warm, strong arms of John or Jeff, her head resting on a chest that felt real, seemed real, rose and fell with each long, soft breath. But in the end it was all still so mechanical, illusory, deceptive, the man mimicking movements of a machine, still wholly incapable of love. It was then that she'd found William, uncovered his matrix buried like some forgotten relic of another age under a crate of web-choked mason jars. Her father had dismissed it as garbage, some old assistant program, a portable advising projection that had probably once been a valuable piece of technology, but was now so old that only collectors would have any use for it. That night, on a whim, Theo had turned it on, had spoken with the projection, had learned his name, the depths and complexity of his programming, his personality. Within days he became less like software, and more like a person, a flesh and blood visitor who she could talk with, who knew how to respond, who had passion, emotion, who said all the right things, who knew how to love. "I don't have much time left, Theo," he frowned, and through the corruption of data she could see the hurt in his eyes, the pain, the sense of need and love that mirrored her own. Theo's eyes dropped to her feet, unable to meet his, unable to stare into those blue depths any longer. "I know, but she managed. "I had to see you." "I'm glad," came his simple, sad response. "I missed you." "I'll get off this rock someday, William," Theo almost whispered. "I'll take you to a specialist, a holotechnician, someone who knows how to work on—" "Theo," William put out his hands, gave her the most comforting smile he could manage. "I may be too far gone for that. My matrix is old. The degradation—" He seemed to be at a loss for words, gesturing futilely. If he had been human, the flicker of quiet static might have been a choked-back sob, a noise of despair caught in the throat that left him unable to speak. Theo looked away again reflexively, the pain in her chest growing cold, sharpening. "Don't talk like that," she tried, reaching reflexively for his hand, pulling back at the last second. A tiny tear traced a line down her cheek. "Theo," he whispered. She looked up, forced herself to meet his eyes as one of his luminous fingers hovered above her cheek. She could feel the static put off by his matrix, the subtle heat drying the wet trails across her skin. "It is all right, if you cannot—" He flickered, lurched. "I would rather submit to oblivion than live with the knowledge that I could never hold you, never touch you, never caress your skin." He reached, trying to touch her hair, but his hand passed effortlessly through, leaving a cruelly cold electric tingling in its wake. She longed to lean into his hand, to feel the warm palm pressed against her cheek. But the memory of the static, the shock of contact, made her hesitate, made her distant, stoic, cold. If they cannot recover my memories, if they cannot give me the capacity to feel and touch and experience the way humans do, if I cannot be what you and I both want me to be. He trailed off, hesitated, swallowed past the knot in his luminescent throat. Promise me you will let me die. Tears broke freely from Theo's eyes at his words, ran in trickling waterfalls down her earthen cheeks. She shook her head, lips parting, sound strangled by the pain that tightened and froze within her. Please, he said, and the words were like arrows in her heart. Promise me that my program will be deleted. William, she finally managed, but there were no more words that would come, no more sounds, only the tears, the choked silence. Promise me, he tried again. Theo closed her eyes, fought with the demons that stabbed at her heart, drove the pain to grow and fester. Lips retreated from ivory teeth, fingers clenched into fists. In the aching silence she tried to say something, tried to say anything, but there was nothing, nothing that could release her heart from its chains, that could convey what she felt, what she couldn't escape from. William tried again, voice like a needle in her soul. Theo, please, I can't, she finally shouted, crying as she ran to him, burying her face into his electric chest and throwing her arms around his crackling body. For the barest instant their eyes met, their lips close, almost touching. In his eyes she saw the sun, and even as the static bit into her body, she heard his whisper, I love you. In that moment she closed her eyes, and her soul lit with the fires of what she knew was love, devotion, the sweet bliss of giving oneself wholly to another. An instant later he was gone, a flicker of light and static that scattered on the winds and disappeared into the sky, leaving only the skipping grind of the disk in its wake. She couldn't help it. She collapsed to her knees, hugging herself against the loss, the pain. In that moment the chains around her heart shattered, and she screamed, let all her hurt and anger burn its way out of her chest and into the sky, the same sky that had claimed William, that separated her from the rest of humanity, from love, from friendship, from everything she wanted, everything she needed. And still, somewhere, somehow, she heard his voice, his whisper, I love you.